Himachal, based in a village called Nagar in Himachal. And so for us, we sort of had a slightly different experience from Nivedita, though, we're in the same country and working with similar groups, that is the artisanal groups out there. Our organization, we primarily work with wool that we buy from the nomadic shepherds, the pastoralists. So when we started the organization, so my co-founder, Raghu, is based in Himachal and Nagar, and I actually live in Pune, and I keep going back and forth maybe 4 or 5 times a year. So when we started the organization, our idea was to connect the pastoralists who provide the wool. And traditionally, that there had always been a connection between the pastoralists and the artisans, for the weavers. They would buy the wool from the shepherds and make garments for themselves. And this link had gotten broken over time because of market forces. Acrylic had entered the market. It was much easier to work with acrylic. And it was just, wool was just way harder to sort of manage and manipulate. So over time, this whole link between the pastoralists and the artisans had broken down. And our idea was, how do we create an entire value chain which is local, which brings this whole traditional sort of thing back, connections back, but in a more contemporary way. And that's what we had been working towards for the last 8-9 years. So when COVID came, it hit around in March 2020. For us, the 2019 season was already over because, being wool, it's seasonal. So we had just finished that season, which was really good for us. And we had just started growing. And I think unlike Nivedita, also we were sort of poised, we were on the upswing. We hadn't really, got a huge scale at that point of time, but we were growing. And we had sort of just started our digital presence, set that up. And when in March, we were kind of winding down at that time. Our main market things were over, and that's when COVID hit. So immediately there wasn't a huge impact. Our main concern was for the health of our artisans, and everybody basically said, they were fine. Being a remote village, being a remote part, again, of India, COVID took a while to sort of reach out there. And the main economy in that region, Himachal is quite wealthy in the sense of the abundance of the landscape, because the main economy is apples. Everybody has apple orchards. So that is the primary family economy. And tourism is a huge economy as well. So actually, though our production season had sort of stopped, had sort of wound down, it was tourism was going to start. So that really made a huge impact on every single homestay and hotel, and guides and taxi operators were very badly hit. And my partner, he runs a homestay, he also is a guide. So for him, his other business suffered a huge setback. But in terms of, but then people also started looking towards the apple season. Around March, April was when the apple blossoms had started. And so at that point, the shutdown didn't affect them too much. And luckily, by around August, September, the government in Himachal opened enough to allow the apple pickers to come in and apple transportation vehicles to move in and out. So they really took care of the economy of the state in that sense. But for our artisans, our main concern, again, around their health, though the medical facilities weren't great out there, people just sort of kept to themselves. They sort of continued with their work. They work a lot outdoors, so that was their main thing. Our model is very, very decentralized in the sense that we do not have a space that people come to. Everybody works in their own homes. So they spin, they weave, they knit in their own homes. So they did not have to come to a space, and they could continue their work in a smallish way. The thing that happened around June, July, what we started seeing, which was really surprising, was we got a lot of people started approaching us from Europe, from the fashion, and from smaller boutiques. Sarah was already working with us, but I think she was also launching her new collection. So there was a lot of work that she gave us at that time. In addition to that, many sustainable business in Europe, from the Netherlands, the UK, France as well, started reaching out to us and sort of asking us about our value chain, wanting to know what we did, what our artisans did, and giving us little orders. And this really helped because this kept everybody busy. They could sit in their homes and continue their work. They didn't really have to, step out and go elsewhere. The other thing was even the children who couldn't go to school or their colleges because they were all shut down started helping their mothers at home with their, with the wool work, which they traditionally used to do as a family. And that's sort of came back a little bit. So in that sense, those were the lot of positives that happened during the pandemic. Later on, when our main winter season happened, 2020 winter, we did struggle with getting wool. I mean, of course, the sheep were abundant and they had their wool on their back, but the shearers couldn't shear. The government shearing facilities were closed. They did not open them. So the large scale shearing in volumes didn't happen. There is a lot of traditional shearing that happens with the scissors. So that still took place in the smaller family, with the family shepherds. So with that way we could procure. So for us, we really had to go, almost literally house to house, like call up families and say, do you have wool? Do you have wool? Because we were really facing an increase. People wanted our products, but we just couldn't access our raw material. So that was a struggle because it is a very disorganized sector. It's not that you go to a market and you buy wool. You have to connect with various families. And when the government facilities shut down, not just for shearing, also for carding, which is another processing of the wool, we just couldn't process the wool. So we had to sort of make do with what we had. So that was about 3 or 4 months where we really struggled in the winter of 2020 with our raw material supply. In terms of my life also, so I couldn't visit the place. I had to, because every 2 or 3 months I go sit with the artisans, work with them. So I had to handle everything remotely. So it was a learning for me as well. At that time, I also started volunteering with another organization called Creative Dignity, which came together to support the artisans. So when I was hearing Mr. Amin, actually, when he was talking about the garment workers and how, the kind of, the support that they didn't get despite being in the organized sector, what happened with Creative Dignity was various organizations all over India. Typically, organizations like NGOs, the non-governmental sectors, work in isolation. You have your funding, you have your little cluster of artisan or large cluster of artisan in whichever state you're in, whether you're in Gujarat or Rajasthan or West Bengal, and you usually work in isolation with them. I mean, the different NGOs don't generally interact with each other, and they're usually very secretive about their cluster of artisans that they work with and the products they make. But at this time, everybody came together, started sharing information about the different areas that they were working in. Whether you were a non-governmental artisan, whether you were designers working with artisans, whether you were the corporate sector who would buy from the artisans, everybody just came together, formed a network, volunteered, and sort of started drilling down to see, okay, what can we do to work with this? Because the artisan sector in India is supposed to be, I mean, the number of unofficial number is 200 million. So you cannot have 200 million people devastated by markets shutting down. So the idea was, how do we support this unorganized sector? And this network way through which Creative Dignity worked really helped a lot. So what we did was, the first thing was to look at the health of the sector, because most of the artisan clusters are in remote areas. And those of us in the city in India, the way it happened, and I think in most countries, was that the cities were devastated. We were very badly affected. Our hospitals were overworked. We didn't have, everybody, you got COVID and you were sick and you were dying. But luckily, it did not permeate as much into the very remote areas. And when we talked to the artisans, when we called them up to say, what do you need? We gave them, this first thing was we sent out communication. We sent out medical kits to the various areas. In Himachal, my partner who was on the ground, he had an idea that because Himachal is, the villages are very remote, the roads are not great. So he said, for each village, let's target the Mahila Mandal. So the Mahila Mandal is a strong women's group which exists in in every village. And they sort of meet weekly, and they may knit or do crafts or just, discuss various things. So he said, let's catch the Mahila Mandals and distribute the medical kits to them, which are, the oximeters and sort of just teach them about what are the first steps, how do you detect COVID and what would you do. So he went around to, more than 40, 50 villages all over distributing these kits so that they could sort of look after their community. And that was similar in different parts of India, that where the artisan community sort of came together to look after their own, and people working in the sector also came together. So that was a huge support for the sector as a whole. The second thing that happened was they started reaching out to markets, because one thing we found was the supply chain, like us, where we couldn't access our wool. A lot of the weavers, a lot of the artisans who work with cotton or other fibers, bamboo, could not access raw material because transport had shut down. So the idea was, okay, how do we sort of start doing that? Sorry, Hannah, did you? Should I continue, or were you saying something?
We had a technical problem here, but you also would also like to ask now the people here in Germany. But it was very interesting how different the situation was in different kinds of regions. Thank you very much, Nisha.
Thank you.
Maybe.
Also, ja, ich würde jetzt gerne. I would like to ask Sarah. I thought that's interesting if you speak one after another because you cooperate. Maybe you can say how, as a buyer, you could still buy things from them and cooperate with them during COVID.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Okay, ich möchte, ja, ich weiß nicht, ob ich sollte auf Deutsch oder Englisch, aber I think, yeah, English is probably better, and then wir können reden auf Deutsch später. So, so as a buyer, you wanted to know, so I sort of wrote a few things out, but that's okay. I think for me, I was somewhat protected because I began in October 2021. I had done research for 3 to 4 years prior to that, but as a business, I didn't go through a really difficult time because I hadn't started yet. What COVID really did for me was it forced me to be home and not go to India. So I didn't spend a lot of money and a lot of time going to India and not starting my website and my business. So it actually helped me to launch in a way. That was a positive, strangely, because I was stuck at home. So I had to learn how to do my website and everything. So that's a positive thing, strangely. Anyway, however, my business is based on transparency and being able to go to India. So that's the other side of that, was that I wasn't able to go and visit the artisans. I wasn't able to go, like I began with wool and knitwear with Nisha, and I had gone in 2019. So we had a connection. Okay, so in 2019, I traveled to Himachal Pradesh. That's when I met Nisha and the artisans of Kulviwim. So I already had that connection. So we built on that. It was okay that I wasn't there for a couple of years. However, I was in the middle of designing a clothing collection, and I wasn't able to go and visit various garment manufacturers to make sure that it was a safe environment, that it was a good environment, that it was a group that I wanted, that I would feel good about working with. So that was difficult. However, I was incredibly lucky. And Nivedita ended up being, and that whole group is who did the manufacturing. And I was able to visit this year. So it turned out fine. However, there are still a few artisans that I was not able to visit yet. So what I prefer is transparency in my entire supply chain, where I can see where the fiber comes from, whether it's cotton, whether it's wool, whatever I'm working with, from flock all the way up to the frock. So from the sheep all the way up to the sweater, or from seed all the way up to a dress, or from seed to sew. So that was a major issue. But at the same time, there's no sense in having transparency if I don't have a business. So it worked out well enough. Let me just get my notes. So the other issue that I had was that ultimately it did slow down some of our production. So that meant that I launched a lot later than I should have by launching in late July this year. And even though we were sort of out of the pandemic, I think that there were some leftover issues. I know there were, where there were still challenges a year beforehand, whether it was our weavers in West Bengal that had a really bad wave come through in the spring of 2021, I think it is. Yeah. So spring 2021, they were struggling. No, 2022. Early 2022, they were struggling. I've forgotten when. Yeah, I'm sure we all have. We don't know what happened in the past few years. And also I know that Kumbaya, the manufacturers, still have issues with travel, and there's a lot of leftover stuff, which I think probably you could ask them about for a more clear understanding about that. So transparency, and ultimately just the production line really slowing down, and just being a struggle for everybody because people are having to take care of their family members. There's issue with food supply, all kinds of issues. A couple of other positives that came out of it, because I couldn't travel to India, I ended up collaborating a little bit more with other people there. So for example, I collaborated with a photographer that was able to be on the ground with the women in Himachal Pradesh, which are the knitters and weavers with wool. And his name is FAIRstrickt Rao. And he did interviews, which were beautiful just to hear somebody else's perspective. And I gained a lot of information in a short period of time by him doing this for me, as well as beautiful photos, which really, really made a huge difference, I think, in being able to sort of, present that supply chain and present those artisans and present that whole part of India. So that was one really cool thing. And one last thing, so I don't take too much time, because I think other people have lots of stuff to say and I have just a little bit, was that in terms of sampling, in the spring of 2021, when everything was shut down, we were able to do, it might have been 2020 even, I don't know anymore, honestly, but there was a lockdown, that I know. Yeah, it was one of the lockdowns in Himachal Pradesh, and I had only thought to do accessories and small items, and we had this big chunk of time, and I knew I couldn't visit, and I knew my website wasn't launched yet. And so we actually sampled larger things than what we expected to do. So that's where our larger shawls came from. That's where our cardigans came from that are coming now this year. It's still a long time before they actually come to market. But basically, the women that were there, they had some wool left over and they were able to do something. So it was able to provide some work while everything was shut down. And that was really, I mean, a positive thing for both of us. So yeah, anyway, I think I can stop there. That's probably, you guys can ask me stuff later.
Yeah, now we want to hear Barbara. She's a shop owner, and it's interesting to hear how she could handle her shop during COVID and how you could continue to buy, or maybe did not continue to buy.
Soll ich mich hier ein bisschen reinhängen oder dass man mich sieht? Ja. Also ich spreche mal auf Deutsch. Ja?
Dann gib mir das Mikro, weil ich den auf Englisch übersetze. Okay, Barbara will talk in German, so I will translate for you. Ja?
Fällt mir ein bisschen leichter, weil es auch emotionale Themen sind für mich. Genau. Also bei uns war es so, dass wir natürlich auch plötzlich geschlossen wurden. Und wenn ich solche Geschichten höre, dann denke ich, klar, im Verhältnis.
She's the shop owner and she had to close her shop during the pandemic. And hearing your stories, she's well off, but still they also have families. There were possibility to have short working hours for the workers. But since she's the shop owner, all her workers ask her, can we please have enough work? So we have enough money to support our families. So we thought about what could we do, like launching an online store.
Möglichst die Menschen in Arbeit zu halten, uns beschäftigt zu halten, den Geist fröhlich zu halten, in irgendeiner Art und Weise Community zu bewahren. Und im Nachhinein betrachtet muss ich sagen, war es keine clevere Idee, weil
so we did everything to go online, and looking back, it was not such a good thing to stay open or do the online shop, because we still earned a little bit money, but not enough to survive. It would have been better to close everything, and then we would have gotten more money from the state, like 90% of our loss. And then we would maybe still live as a store, and the people still could have work. So this is the tragedy, because we worked a lot and we worked long hours, but we didn't earn enough to keep the shop open. And because we worked, we didn't get all the money from the state, and that's why we had to close the store. So we were at the place where actually
diese Lockdowns unheimlich viele Kollateralschäden mitgebracht haben, die wir hier hören und die wir auch bei uns hören. Und was war noch sehr negativ, dass uns immer wieder versprochen
actually before the pandemic, we were at the place where we actually were about to do well as a shop, because it takes a long time to be really well off as a shop. But then the pandemic came, and then the lockdowns, they were really like the worst idea that they could have, because it destroyed every work we could do.
In Indien, Bangladesch und so zum Teil, dass die stärksten Zeiten immer Weihnachten und März sind, und es war über mehrere Jahre jetzt immer die Zeit.
And then the problem is, like, for here in Germany with Christmas, this is the best time to sell product. You know, people go shopping before Christmas, and the lockdowns were always in that time, in winter before Christmas, and they came without warning. So yeah, that was really bad. So I have one more negative thing to say before I come to the positive things. One negative thing was that we were so tired. Like, I'm a really positive person, and I'm a very strong person, but I couldn't sleep anymore. I was really getting sick, and I had the fatigue. I was so tired. And also my daughter, I mean, I'm not only a shop owner, I'm like a mother and a family member and a partner, and everywhere were explosions. I mean, I think all of you had this, and we were so tired and really, like, also mentally getting sick. The positive things was that I also had to think about new models of my store, like how do I do my store? How can I do online shop? So I started to sell other products as well, like drinks and cosmetic things. If we would have been allowed to sell these things before, you know, then maybe we could have survived. But because in Germany, certain things were allowed to sell, like books. The bookstores could be open, and she's just saying that if I would have been allowed to sell books, I could have stayed open. But no, I was selling clothes, so I had to close my store. Some shop owners, they changed, like they were selling drinks and food, and then they could stay open. But for me, I thought, you know, this is too much to me. If I would have sold only children clothing for babies, then I maybe could have stayed open. But I thought this is stupid, because what do I do afterwards? So, and then we had the positive things, like 2020, everybody was, you know, coming together, and we were all positive. You know, we worked together, like all the inhabitants of Tübingen. We thought about how can we stay open? What can we do to survive? Like the restaurants work together with shop owners.
Auch noch ganz positiv war dieses Erlebnis, dass von vielen Ecken und Enden Hilfe kam.
Positive was as well that we had to help actions. So we raised our voice and said we cannot survive. And there were so many people who would normally come to the store and buy stuff, our textiles. They would give us money, you know, and
Und das musste auch alles aufgefangen werden, quasi in dem Jahr, wo dann eigentlich gar keine Kapazität mehr war und auch weniger Personal. Und das sind dann auch mal Freunde eingesprungen.
And you know, people helped with also standing in the store and selling things without asking for money. So there was a lot of understanding, like in personal ways. Danke, Barbara. Thank you, Barbara. Maybe you want to come close to the video camera once so that everybody can see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Now we thought it would be interesting to talk about the German Supply Chain Act. And so we have invited Uwe Kleinert. And what is interesting for me about it is that I have a lot of hope into this law. And yeah, maybe you can first explain what the German Supply Chain Act is, and then we continue our discussion.
So, and I will try to translate into the English. I hope you understand me. Otherwise, you ask later the question if you didn't understand. Okay, thank you. Maybe Uwe, do you want to look very shortly into the camera so everybody can? So,
Hello,
yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Ich bin ehrlich gesagt ein bisschen unsicher, ob das tatsächlich, was ich jetzt zu erzählen habe, den Menschen auf der anderen Seite der Kameras.
He's a little bit unsure because he doesn't know if what he's talking about will actually help you in India and Bangladesh, because if we talk about the Supply Chain Act, it's about the conventional businesses, like not social enterprises. Like this is something maybe Mr. Ruhul can gain a strength for his work in the factory.
Und das war natürlich auch dann ging auch zulasten der Arbeiterinnen und Arbeiter.
We know that the businesses here reacted because they wanted to put all the difficulties on the factories in India and Bangladesh, so they have all the money.
Ich versuche
Ich
es ganz kurz zu skizzieren, worum es bei dem Gesetz geht.
I try to sketch very shortly what the Supply Chain Act is about.
Das deutsche Gesetz geht zurück auf die UN-Leitprinzipien für Wirtschaft und Menschenrechte aus dem Jahr 2011.
So it goes back to the human rights and economy declaration of the UN from 2011. UN Guiding Principles.
Und die sagt eben, dass der Staat und die Unternehmen jeweils Verantwortung haben für die Einhaltung der Menschenrechte.
Which says that the businesses and the state are responsible for human rights. And yeah, if the state does nothing, the businesses still have to do something that the human rights are there.
In den UN Guiding Principles ist ein relativ ausführlicher Menschenrechtskatalog auch genau explizit benannt.
And those in these UN Guiding Principles, there's a big catalog of human rights principles.
Aber nicht nur sind die ILO-Kernarbeitsnormen, die uns wahrscheinlich allen vertraut sind.
What is this in English? ILO Kernarbeitsnorm, Johannes?
Co-Conventions, ILO Co-Conventions.
Sorry, if
ILO Co-Conventions.
okay, the ILO co-conventions are a big part of this.
Kernbegriff bei den UN-Leitprinzipien ist die Human Rights Due Diligence, die menschenrechtliche Sorgfaltspflicht.
The human, oh God.
Human rights due diligence are at the center of this law.
Der Kern dieser Human Rights Due Diligence.
The center of this human rights due diligence is that all enterprises need to do analysis of all the risks that could be in their supply chain.
Sie müssen angemessene Maßnahmen ergreifen, um das Risiko zu minimieren.
They need to take measures to reduce the risk.
Wichtig ist dabei das Wort angemessene Maßnahmen.
Very important is, thank you, the word appropriate measures,
Weil das ist ein offener Punkt, darüber wird zu streiten sein, was ist appropriate.
because this is a point that is on debate.
Sie müssen außerdem transparent darstellen, was sie tun.
They need to work transparently and they need to show whether it's effective or not. And if it's not effective, they have to change their measures.
Und natürlich müssen sie, wenn Menschenrechtsverletzungen passieren, Abhilfe schaffen und Wiedergutmachung leisten.
If human rights problems happen, are violated, they must do something.
Okay. Wir haben jetzt ein deutsches Gesetz.
Okay, now we have the German Supply Chain Act.
Und es wird in Kraft am Anfang des nächsten Jahres.
Will enter into force next year, the beginning of next year. We don't know anything about how it will be implemented.
Ist, dass es nur für sehr große Unternehmen
We know it's only for big enterprises.
Im ersten Jahr liegt die Mindestbeschäftigtenzahl bei 3.000 Beschäftigten.
All enterprises that have more than 3,000 employees
Ein Jahr später
fall under the law.
ist abgesenkt auf 1.000 Beschäftigte.
After 1 year, it goes down to 1,000 employees.
Im deutschen Gesetz ist die behördliche Kontrolle relativ stark. Also es gibt eine Behörde.
In Germany, we have was heißt Behörde? Okay, the administrative force is very strong.
Und es können Sanktionen verhängt werden, Bußgelder verhängt werden.
They can
Wenn
do
Unternehmen
sanctions
nicht umsetzen.
if enterprises do not respect their due diligence obligations.
Okay, es gibt weitere Schwächen des deutschen Gesetzes, auf die gehe ich jetzt nicht ein.
There are a few other weaknesses of this law. But he won't talk about this because luckily now we're talking about a European Supply Chain Act. If this comes into being, the German one needs to be adapted to the European law. The positive aspect is that in the European law draft, it would also small enterprises would fall under the law. In risk areas, even factories, enterprises who employ 250 people would fall under the law. That would be relevant for the textile sector. In contrast to the German law, the whole supply chain from resource to the finished product falls under the law. The decisive point and I hope that will be a very well, it will improve work in the global south, that people who have, that victims of human rights can, das heißt klagen, sorry, can sue in front of the European Court of Human Rights? No, just the national courts. Okay. Ich kann ruhig machen. So, I hope you could understand from our translations. So we would like to know whether you have heard of this German, or also of the German Supply Chain Act, and maybe also of the European Supply Chain Act draft. And what do you think of it?
So maybe this is we can ask Mr. Ruhul at first. Have you heard of the German Supply Chain Act, and do you think it would be helping the workers in the factories if it is enforced in next year? And maybe if you, okay. Mr. Mafusul, if you translate into English, don't forget to turn on your microphone.
Yes. I was just explaining to him. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I have already told her, but he is not responding. I don't know why. So I'm again switching back to Bengali channel to give him some instruction.
Okay, then while you do so, we will ask Nisha, have you heard of this act?
I hadn't heard of it until now, so thanks for that. I mean, it was very interesting to know what goes into it. I wonder, I mean, I think it for factory workers, for the garment workers, and the larger artisanal organizations, I think it does have relevance for it. The flip side is that in India, there are the sector is also very unorganized, where you do not have a lot of different laws governing the labor the different sort of types of labor and how they do it. And a lot of the larger studios, even larger studios, are family run. It's apprenticeship based. So I think at some point it may have to take into account the context, the Indian context of the sector, especially the traditional craft sector, if we're looking to apply it there. But I do think definitely for the larger factories, especially the garment factories, it definitely makes sense to look at it. Thanks.
Hannah, I
Thank you
think
so much.
Ruhul Bhai is having technical difficulties. He is disconnected now. Maybe some network issues. Arifur Rahman is trying to fix that out.
Okay. Thank you. So, Nivedita, have you heard of that act or?
No, I hadn't heard of the German Supply Chain Act, but of course, it's very good for that, as Nisha was saying, for the organized sector in the government workers in India, if it can be implemented. But in the sense of implementation, there are a lot of problems on the other side, where a lot of government unions or trade unions in India would also see that to implement, let's say, the German Supply Chain Act or any other act that of fair trade and fair wages and better working conditions, etc., and sustainability in the business would also require a certain influx of funds to make them possible. So that is something I do feel that as buyers, the buyers do insist a lot on certain compliances, legal and social and security. But what they don't look at is the additional funds required to make it possible through let's say a collaboration or some kind of capital investment in making those compliances a reality by investing in infrastructure or some kind of compassionate capital and things like that. So that is the concern I do have, where on one side it's important to have certain things in place, but on the other side they have to be made possible in partnership with let's say a buyer and a supplier collaboration.
Thank you, Nivedita. Maybe because Mr. Ruhul is not,
unfortunately, he is not connected.
Oh, now he seems to be back, but maybe we can, until you establish the connection again, maybe Mr. Rahman, since you are from the Asia Floor Alliance, maybe you can say something.
Hannah, Mr. Ruhul is back from
okay, then
another idea.
Okay, thank you so much. Then we want to hear Mr.
I am asking him the question again, and I will translate his answer too.
Thank you so much, Mahfuzul.
জি মাহফুজুল ভাই, আমি বাংলায় বলি নাকি? রুহুল ভাই যদি রিটার্ন করেন,
আমি লাইনে আছি, আমি শুনতে পাচ্ছি।
না আসে তাহলে আমি কিছু বলবো কিনা?
আমি তো হ্যালো আরিফ ভাই,
Mr. Ruhul is back, so I can say something after Ruhul.
বলেন। Hello, I am waiting for Mr. Ruhul's speech. Sorry, everyone. I think we have lost him again. So can Mr. Arifur Rahman explain on this topic?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mahfuzul.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, but thank you.
So yes, sorry. I think Mr. Ruhul's connection is low. So may I say something about?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, please.
মাহফুজুল ভাই, আমি বাংলায় বলি,
So Arifur will be talking in Bengali and I will translate that into English.
Yes, welcome.
So now both of them is talking over each other. Okay, we got both of you now. So who will speak first? Arif bhai or Ruhul bhai? So I am actually confused. I am listening from both of them. Please give us 1 or 2 minutes. Okay.
আইনটা আমাদের জন্য কতটুকু ফ্রুটফুল এবং এই ব্যাপারে একটু
জার্মানের সাপ্লাই চেইন আইন সম্পর্কে আমার আগে
So now Ruhul bhai is talking and in fact he didn't have any specific details on the German Supply Chain Act. His voice is fading out actually. I can't hear him properly, but as far as I can understand from his speech that he wasn't aware about the German Supply Chain Act, but he thinks somehow it would be helpful for the garments worker of Bangladesh also to ensure their human rights. So that's what he says basically. Yeah, yes, Mr. Arif, I can hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Ruhul. Go ahead, Mr. Rahman.
Yes, thank you very much. মাহফুজুল ভাই আপনি একটু ট্রান্সলেট করুন
Yes, Arif bhai.
জার্মানের যে সাপ্লাই চেইনের জন্য যে নতুন আইনটি হয়েছে যেটা আমরা শুনলাম এখন সেটা সম্বন্ধে আমার জানা ছিল না আগে তো নিঃসন্দেহে এই
Arif bhai also didn't know about the German Supply Chain Act before today's meeting, but as we had a discussion on that act, so Mr. Arifur Rahman thinks it would be also helpful for the garments worker of Bangladesh and it can have a positive impact on their life.
জীবন মান সম্পন্ন একটা মজুরি তারা পাচ্ছেন না এবং তাদের কাজের পরিবেশ এখন আগের চেয়ে আরো খারাপ এবং অনেক
he thinks it could be helpful to ensure a better work environment for the workers.
তাদের দৈনিক চাহিদা মেটানো মানে খুবই একটা চ্যালেঞ্জের ব্যাপার হয়ে গেছে এবং দিন দিন তাদের কর্মক্ষমতা তারা হারাচ্ছে এই পরিস্থিতিতে
And day by day due to the global economic crisis, it has been difficult for the garments worker of our country to maintain a standard way of life.
গার্মেন্টস শিল্পের সাথে আছেন তারা আরো তাদের জীবনমান কিছুটা উন্নত হবে এবং সেটা নির্ভর করবে এই আইনের সঠিক প্রয়োগের উপরে এবং সাথে সাথে বাংলাদেশের যে আইন আছে সেই আইনটার যদি সঠিক প্রয়োগ হয় তাহলে আমি মনে করি যে এই
So what Mr. Arif thinks is the German Supply Chain Act can be helpful in the context of Bangladesh, but we should also ensure that our existing Bangladeshi laws related to labor and garments workers should also be implemented properly to ensure the human rights of the worker. So he thanks you all.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, now we want to open, now we want to ask the audience whether they have questions for you.
Hast du eine Frage?
Ich habe keine Frage, sondern ich würde sagen, unsere Aufgabe ist es, die Kollegen zu informieren über das deutsche Gesetz.
Okay, Uwe, he doesn't have a question, but he thinks that our job is to inform you about the German Supply Chain Act, you know, because since you don't know, it's really our job to inform you.
Es ist wichtig, dass es in Indien, in Bangladesch, wo auch immer auf der Welt diskutiert wird.
it's very important that you discuss at your workplaces this law, because ja, ist gut. Ich muss es noch übersetzen. Okay, so the question is how can we, the best can give you the information about this law? How, you know? How can we transfer our knowledge about the law to you, and you can transfer the knowledge to the workers?
That they know they have certain rights, for example, to sue a company which doesn't stick to certain principles of human rights.
Because
They
this,
have legal possibility now.
you want to say it?
No, I just wanted to say how is it possible to inform the workers and the unions that we have this law now, which make it possible for them to sue a company which doesn't stick to certain principles, doesn't follow certain laws. This would be very important that the workers and their unions get this information, that they have more legal rights now than they had before.
And how could you use your networks and your powers to spread those informations? Yeah, that would be quite important, I guess.
Okay, I wait for your answers.
Can I say something?
Yes, please, Nisha, you can say something.
I think the biggest thing is to understand the mechanisms. Like there are a lot of laws, especially even in India, which protect, say, intellectual property of traditional craft and things like that. But they basically they're found to be without teeth, in the sense there is no redressal mechanism. That there is no process by how do you go to a somebody can say, yes, this is copyrighted and somebody has stolen the copyright, but then after that, what? Like, how do you do that? So in the same way, how do you have, to understand the mechanism? Like, if there is a complaint, what is the process and how do you do this redressal?
Maybe
would be useful to understand.
Uwe, you want to say something about this?
Wir wissen ja noch nichts über die Umsetzung, weil es noch nicht in Kraft ist.
We don't know really how it will be enforced, because it's only be enforced in 23.
Ich denke, die erste Aufgabe, und ich würde es übernehmen, ich recherchiere, ob es eine englische Übersetzung des Gesetzes gibt.
So Uwe thinks his first job is if there's an English translation of the law, and he's willing to research if there's an English translation, and then he can send it to you.
Ja, oder eine Kurzfassung.
Or maybe a short version. Maybe Sarah could help. And there's other NGOs in Germany like Femnet. I don't know if you have heard about, Nisha, you have probably heard about Femnet maybe, and Nivedita, maybe you have heard about Femnet. It's a German NGO working mainly for on women's rights. And they probably do a lot about this. And they work closely with India and Bangladesh. So maybe if you have an English version, we could send it also to the Asia Wage Alliance, and then you can spread it under the workers. Mr. Mafusul, I want to say, if you talking to us, because we don't hear you.
No, I was explaining your words into Bengali to Arif
Okay.
and Ruhul bhai.
Okay, thank you
Yeah.
so much. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
my pleasure. Yeah.
So for us, it's really interesting that nobody of you knows about the law, because this has been a really big campaign in Germany. And we have a lot of hopes into this law, that it's actually helping human rights in the global south. So now we know that there's work to be done, that also you know about the law, because one part of the law is that if, for example, we in Germany know that there's a human rights violation, we can go to the enterprise, we can go to the factory owners and say there is a human rights violation, you have to do something about it. And if they don't do it, then they can get sued. So they cannot hide anymore. So we have big hopes in that law. And otherwise, I would really, besides from the law, I would like to, Mr. Rahman, you want to say something? Thank you. You can speak if you want. Please turn on your microphone.
Yes, yes.
So Mr. Arif wants to say something, I guess. Yeah.
মানে যেহেতু এই জার্মানির এই আইনটা মানে টোটাল সাপ্লাই চেইন অন্তত জার্মানের যে ব্র্যান্ড বায়ার আছে তাদের সাথে যে আমাদের ফ্যাক্টরিগুলি বাংলাদেশে এবং শ্রমিকগুলি যারা জড়িত আছে তাদের যেহেতু মানে সকলের জীবনমান উন্নয়নের জন্য একটা বিশাল পদক্ষেপ একটা, তো সুতরাং আমার মনে হয় যে এই যেহেতু এই আইনটা হয়েছে সুতরাং এই আইনটার প্রয়োগ সঠিক প্রয়োগ
Mr. Arif thinks it will be a huge step to ensure the human rights of the garments worker all around the world, but he is emphasizing on the implementation of this act while and he thinks there will be no meaning of this act if we can't implement it properly. So he is emphasizing on the implementation of this act. And in the context of our country, I mean Bangladesh, we can relate this act with our existing laws of our country. So he is basically emphasizing on coordination, implementation, and partnership between different organizations and different countries. And as it will be applicable in 2023, so we should build an effective mechanism by this time during this year, so we can hope for the best result out of this act. And to ensure the success of this act, we should also focus on the local context. We can also run sessions with other organizations, alliance who are actually directly working with the labor movement, working with the garments worker. So he is emphasizing on a holistic approach that we can take. And I think now Ruhul Amin is saying something. I will explain that into English. Mr. Ruhul thinks we should make people aware about this act so that they can understand the whole mechanism of it. And making people aware will make it easier to implement this act properly. And he thinks the implementation process will be the difficult part of it.
সেটা ফ্যাক্টরি লেভেলেই প্রধানত করতে হবে, একই সাথে ন্যাশনাল লেভেল এবং ইন্টারন্যাশনাল তিন স্তরে আমাদের লড়াইটাকে।
And he is also emphasizing on the coordination both on national level, factory level, and on international level.
মুভমেন্টের ভেতর দিয়ে নতুন নতুন আইনের প্রয়োজনীয়তা এটা আমাদের সামনে আসবে, আরো আইন প্রণয়নের দাবিগুলা, সেই পয়েন্টগুলা আমরা তখন সঠিক করে সেটা আবার নতুন করে প্রণয়ন করতে পারি। এইভাবে ধাপে ধাপে আমরা অগ্রসর।
And he thinks we should go ahead step by step to implement this act properly, and we can create awareness campaign. We can run different movements to make people aware about this act, which will eventually lead us to success.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ruhul. Before
Thank you.
I want to come back to you, Nivedita and Nisha, to ask you what we can do in Germany for the small companies. But first, we have a question from the audience still.
Well, I think what is very important, we had these big tragedies like Rana Plaza where 1,000 people were killed, and accidents due to bad safety standards in Pakistan or in Bangladesh. And we know that German companies who produce there, who have their products made there, are involved in these tragedies. And up to now, they could say, we are not responsible. This is a problem of the country of Pakistan or of Bangladesh. And we have agreements with certain companies, but it's none of our business if they stick to their own laws or not. But now the German companies involved can be made responsible if these violation of human rights happen there. Not just the companies in the countries of the South, but also the company in Germany itself can be made responsible for such violations. And I think this is something new.
Sorry, Jasmine, did you want to say something to us all?
Yes, if I'm audible, I know I'm not really a panel member in the sense that the wonderful people here are, but I just wanted to highlight some of the work that Asia Florigilance also does and is already doing. We work on the concept of joint employer liability, which is that exactly what this audience member just said. The new German law seeks to bring about supply chain regulation where the brand in Germany is held accountable for the violations that happen in a producing country such as Bangladesh or Pakistan. So one important aspect of that is that the brand is held liable, not the supplier or the worker or any of the other middlemen in the supply chain. And I think what would make it a lot easier for a Bangladeshi worker to access and maybe place a complaint against a German brand would be a system where a transparent system where they know where there is a linkage between the suppliers that they work for and the brand to whom it is linked in Germany. So some of the things that we research is what are the supplier lists, what are the brand lists, and we try to link them up because it is important, and it is a worker's right to know who their employer is. And in this case, what the German law, I think, also is trying to bring about is that sort of accountability, that sort of transparency in the supply chain. I do feel it, and I do feel from Asia Flovigilance's existing work that the German supply chain law will really advance the addressing of human rights violations in the supply chain, but it has to be legally binding. It cannot be a law that is passed in Germany and then it just stays there. So what we say is that it is important for brands to sign legally binding agreements with the suppliers, with the factories in these producing countries. And I think I can talk more about it, but I think I can send you some more material. Arifur can also speak about it, how that is implemented on national level, on an international level, and how it is really important, even as consumers, to know about the role that you play, that brands are not just buyers, they're also employers, they're also responsible for the workers in the supply chain. So that's what I wanted to add. And I think the law needs a lot more publicity, but I think that there's a lot more work, that a lot more discussion that needs to be done before implementation can really work out. Yeah, thank you.
And thank you very much, Tasmin, and thank you everybody. This was very enlightening for us also, because now we know that there's still a lot of work to do, and I'm very happy that we're having this panel, because yeah, we never know what happens to Germany, how you know about it. So now we leave the big enterprises again, and I would like to give the last question to Nivedita and Nisha, since the Supply Chain Act is only for big enterprises and not for small artisan enterprises, social enterprises. Maybe you can also give us a word how we still can support your work for human rights. Please, Nivedita, do you want to start? You please turn on your microphone.
Should I speak, or should Nisha do it first?
Sorry, you can speak, Nivedita, and we hear you.
Okay. So, so first of all, I wanted to really thank Tasmin for putting the issue so clearly and so sharply, because that's very important, and it really has a relevance. And I also think that it's not entirely irrelevant to us as small producers, the German Supply Chain Act, because it sort of sets guidelines of some sort, because small organizations then can follow certain compliances, even though they're small, in terms of working on fair trade or fair wages. But what would really help, let's say, something like Kumbaya, would be really two things mainly. One would be to for people to support in terms of marketing by understanding our products and maybe enabling more orders. And the other thing that would really help would be something which is nowadays called the compassionate capital. Long, very, very easy working capital loans of small amounts, but enough to be able to sort of lift you out of a debt trap or a certain situation that has been created because of COVID. So these two things I would say would be very helpful, and of course digital marketing of a certain, that would also help. Things that people can do from other countries would be very useful.
Thank you, Nivedita. I will shortly ask the audience if they understood everything, okay? Okay, so they're very interested, and I told them that we have all the links to your company, and we would share it on Instagram, and so you get more publicity.
One of the things that I'm constantly not being able to talk about is exactly this, that the help that we got the most from is from people like Sarah. So, Sarah and other people people from other countries who helped at that time. So that sort of kept us going, whereas we could have given up at a certain point. At least that's how I felt. But there was Sarah, there were other designers who were there from countries, and they helped in by getting very deliberately getting their manufacturing done by us, whereas they could have gone for people who would have been faster and maybe cheaper. So something like that is what I'm talking about. I mean, it's already there as a model, the solution. So that would sort of help much more if there were many more such people.
Okay, thank you so much, Nivedita, and thank you, Sarah. So maybe the last word has Nisha. Nisha, please, you want to say something? Please turn on your, yes.
Yeah. I just want to add, I think between, Nivedita has said a lot of the things, similar things. What I want to add is from buyers in Germany and other countries there, what we would ask is patience. Basically, it's a whole different set of community that you're coming to work with. It's not technology, it's a whole other type of technology, which is by hand, and it takes its own time. It has its own quality standards. So to not sort of assess things by the standards that the industry has set, but to develop your own things with the community that you're working with. And so that is a big thing, and that is what we are seeing.
Sorry, Nisha, I need to interrupt you because please, can you start again, because our audio was off, broken, so we didn't hear anything what you said. I'm so sorry.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. So what I wanted to say was one of the biggest things that we ask from our buyers in Germany and other places there when they come to work with us is understanding and patience. Basically, patience to know that this is a whole other type of industry that you're working with. We are not, everything is made by hand. It's very hand intensive. It is time consuming. It is not something that you're going to get in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, the products. It takes its own time of, up 3 to 4 months even for us to produce things. And so in that time, we also need to have our own terms, especially in terms of the monetary things, and when we talk about advances and working capital and things, a lot of times we are met with things, but this is the industry standard, 20% or 30% is the industry standard. And we really struggle with a lot of those things. And since we're smaller, those are not things we can fight against. But then when there are, certain people who come and see, come down, look at us, see the context, and they understand, and then they're ready to, sort of go ahead with it. So
okay,
I think
I will shortly translate.
Ja.
Okay, sie sagt vor allen Dingen, also, dass Leute verstehen müssen, dass sie sehr lange brauchen. Also sie sind keine Industrie, wo man Sachen ganz schnell herstellen kann, sondern es braucht einfach seine Zeit. Und wenn Leute das verstehen, dann hilft es ihnen schon sehr. Wir machen nachher, okay? Okay, and you can go on, Nisha. Thank you.
Yeah. So that is the main thing that we would want, to just understand that it's a whole other way of production. It's almost a way of life. I mean, we do not want to have timing. Sometimes people will ask us, what are the hours your artisans work? What is your per, when we talk about fair wages and things, they want to know the number of hours and things. And we don't measure that because, it is sort of the rhythm of the day. They will work for 2 hours in the morning, sit and, go make lunch. Kids may come home from school and then they'll continue working. So it follows their own rhythm, and to sort of understand that and trust in that process,
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can go on if you still.
No, that's basically to come up with our own terms for this kind of an industry, and to work with the people, the community that you come into, to see what works for them.
Thank you so much. Also sie sagt noch, dass man muss einfach gucken, wie für jede Community das ist, wie sie arbeiten, und kann nicht alles gleich auf alle anwenden, alle Gedanken, die man dazu hat. So I want to close and with thanking you all. I mean, I know time is up. I would have loved that maybe you have also questions for us, if we can answer them. But I feel that we can still stay in contact, and if you have questions about whatever, then you please feel free to ask them via mail. It was really great having you.
Thank you.
Okay, then I would say goodbye.
Oh, thank you all.
Sleep well, since it's how late it is. It's very late now in your region, so sleep well.
Yes, rightly.
Have a good rest, and have a good day tomorrow, good working day, good day with your families. Be healthy, and maybe we see each other again. That would be great.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.
It was a pleasure.